Morning, everyone. Assalamu alaikum. Thank you very much for coming to this first Hyphen Festival. I hope you enjoy our panels and interviews today. I look forward to meeting everyone here during the course of the day. Just some basic housekeeping. I think on every desk you should be able to find an order of events, which will kind of talk you through all the panels today and our talks. But first, before we get started, a few words about Hyphen. Since we launched in 2022, our mission has been clear. Hyphen is here to give our readers a 360-degree view of Muslim life in the UK and Europe. From the UK to France, Germany, Spain, and beyond, our original reporting seeks to cast a light on how ordinary Muslims live their lives. Our focus on Muslim communities has an element of redress. Too often, reporting about Muslims has had a predetermined tendency to marginalize them by framing them as threats to national security or as a beleaguered faith community which has little stake in British society. Hyphen is a corrective to this narrative. Our stories clearly demonstrate that British and European Muslims are proud and active stakeholders in our daily institutions and are at the forefront of helping shape the countries we call home. From actively participating in local and national politics to Hyphen stories about Muslims working in education, healthcare, business, lifestyle, and the arts, our human-centered journalism is both the story of a changing Europe and that of ordinary heroes working hard to support their communities. At Hyphen, we believe that there has never existed a more vital time for reporting that cuts through the noise of social media. Last summer saw an explosion of racist and far-right violence on the streets of over a dozen UK towns and cities, much of it, as we all know, targeting Muslims and Muslim-run institutions. Our reporting from cities like Liverpool, Oldham, Belfast, Rotherham, Southport was unparalleled in explaining how ordinary men and women continue to be affected by the aftercurrents of this violence, the causes of which will have to be addressed by the government for years to follow. As the leading media platform on Muslim life in the UK and Europe, we believe Hyphen has played an important role in demonstrating how Muslims and Muslim communities have played an ever greater role in shaping the cultural, political, and economic landscape of our societies. Nowhere has this been better demonstrated than in our exclusive polls, which have been commissioned in conjunction with Savanta. Since we launched, and over the course of 4 major polls from 2022, including last year's poll on the general election, which many may remember reading here, and the debate over assisted dying, we have demonstrated both consensus on subjects like how the cost of living crisis is affecting everyone, and divergence on faith-based concerns over assisted dying. Combined, we feel this research in these areas breaks new ground on how Muslims are portrayed in the media. Unsurprisingly, many of our findings have been picked up by the national press, including the BBC, The Times, The Washington Post, ITN, and The Guardian. At Hyphen, we all very much see this as a validation of our fact-based journalism. Lastly, I would like to pay a special tribute to the team of Hyphen journalists here today. Our reporters and editors and social media team, whose extraordinary work has seen our site grow over the last 3 years. Our work would not have been possible without them. I'm also particularly proud to announce that 3 of our journalists, Anita Moretti, Saman Javed, Lucas Kumiski, who are all here today, have been shortlisted for this year's British Journalism Awards. Last but not least, Aisha Rimi, who's also here today, recently won the Journalist Media Personality of the Year at the Black Muslim Awards 2025. Thank you all for coming. I look forward to meeting you all over the course of the day and hope you all have a wonderful time. Thank you. We're going to start straight away with our first panel discussion. How will Muslim voters respond to the UK's current political challenges? Chairing this panel is Hyphen Deputy Editor, News and Investigations, Ramzi Al-Wakil. Participants are Shavanah Taj, the General Secretary of the Wales Trade Union Congress, Mothin Ali, Co-Deputy Leader of the Green Party, and Hina Bukhari, Liberal Democrat, London Assembly Leader. Thank you.
Hello, I assume everyone can hear me fine? Yeah, good. Thanks, Burhan, for that. This isn't an optical illusion. You will notice there are actually only two panellists here currently. We are eagerly expecting the third any moment now. I think there's been a slight travel issue because he's come down from Yorkshire. But thanks so much for joining us. So yeah, as Burhan said, we have Shavanah Taj from the Welsh TUC, and Hina Bukhari, who is the leader of the Liberal Democrat group on the London Assembly, here to discuss how Muslim voters might respond to the various political challenges currently facing the UK, which I think is a polite way of putting some of the situations that we find ourselves in at the moment. So I'm going to kick off, and hopefully our third panellist will join us shortly. But Shav, I'd like to start with you. And what I'm going to do is I've got a couple of questions for kind of all of you individually, and then there'll be a bit of a wider sort of discussion that you can all chip in on. So, Shav, analysis for us, for Hyphen, in the days after the election last year, found that Labour's vote share had dropped quite significantly in constituencies that had large Muslim communities living in them. And of course, Muslim voters have been partly credited for the election of some independent MPs last year in what were supposed to be Labour safe seats. Do you feel, I should point out at this point that Shav is also seeking election as a prospective Labour candidate next year.
In the Senate.
In the Welsh, yes. Yeah. Do you feel that Labour's relationship with Muslims has changed since the election last year? And if so, how?
Okay, I think that it was a wake-up call, if nothing else, and you can see in terms of the speech that Keir gave recently. You know, he's done some backpedaling in terms of some of his previous positioning, particularly around the obsession with whether or not a particular flag is okay to put up or not, and how it makes people feel, or whether this is an island of strangers or not, which for many of us in this room was more than uncomfortable. And this is me just using words because I know I'm on a panel right now. There would be other words I would probably use in a casual conversation. But genuinely, I think that they've had a wake-up call, and it's important that that happens. And I think that, if anything, now going forward, it is going to be very interesting to see what happens in terms of the upcoming then local authority, the council elections, but also in terms of what's going to happen in Wales.
Yeah.
So from a Welsh perspective, we've had Labour in charge for an extremely long time. But at that time, the Senedd, the shape of the Senedd was very, very different. And in Wales, in comparison to other parts of the country, we didn't, elect independents. But we did see more Muslim voters moving towards the Green Party, for example.
Right.
When we looked at that data, it did tell us that those individuals were younger voters, and they were individuals who were then equally saying that Palestine and Gaza was an issue, but housing was an issue for them as well. Sure. And they didn't feel that the government was doing enough in terms of the international issue, but also the impact on a day-to-day basis, costs of living, etc. So for them, those were the things. But in Wales, I guess the difference is that unlike at a UK level, the way that the the normal, what we refer to as the Welsh way of working, which we've, since it's 2 years since we legislated for what we refer to as social partnership, which basically means that you've got to have all the players in a room around the table when you are looking to make any decisions. So that includes unions, government, community representatives, etc. So just the way that we work and the way that we operate is very, very different to what you see in the Westminster bubble.
Sure, okay. I'll come back to the question of the by-election recently in due course, but yeah, thanks, that's helpful. So Hina, a question for you. So the government said it's going to give 16 and 17-year-olds the vote by the next general election. Of course, they've already got the vote in Scotland and Wales. With Islam the youngest religion in Britain, in terms of the profile of people who are Muslim and tend to be younger than other religions, this is a big enfranchisement for young Muslims especially. We reported last week that 11% of the new cohort of voters will be Muslim. You worked as a teacher for 2 decades before entering politics, so I'm curious about what impact you think all of those new young voters, especially young Muslims, is going to have.
It's going to make a massive difference. It's something that the Liberal Democrats have been pushing for many years. It's been one of their main asks to change the political system, and one of those asks, not just having proportional representation, but also to make sure that 16-year-olds get the right to vote.
Yeah.
Previous to the time that I got elected, I'd been working with young people to get them engaged into politics. And for a long time, there has been this disengagement, disillusionment with politics. Also, a lot of young people are saying that there's not enough being done in schools themselves to make sure that they have a real good understanding of the political system. There are primary school teachers will tell you that they do these lessons on British society and how to be, and British values. But that doesn't necessarily mean you really have an understanding of how the institutions work, how you can vote, how you can get engaged. And it all depends on whether schools are willing to take that extra step of doing things like mock elections, etc. Now, I think now that we're getting to a position where 16-year-olds are going to have that opportunity, they'll be making the ask themselves now. I think that this is an incredibly powerful time for young people, and it's going to shift the way politics even, behaves in some way. A lot of people can argue that politicians are only going to talk to the people who are going to vote. So therefore, there's a lot of focus on perhaps pensions rather than housing or other issues that perhaps young people are more passionate about. And I do sometimes think that if we had 16-year-olds being allowed to vote, would Brexit have even happened in the first place?
Yeah, okay, interesting. We've been joined by Mothin Ali. Hello, how you doing?
I'm all right, a little bit stressed. But yeah, just I got on the wrong train, went in the wrong direction.
No.
And then I just realised I was across the road and I got in a taxi and ended up somewhere else.
Oh, no.
That is stressful.
Well,
So this is what happens.
Welcome to London.
yeah, I was going to say, this is the... well, I'm very grateful that you managed to join us. We've just kicked off, and I was going to say I'm just starting with a couple of questions for each of the panellists individually, so it brings me nicely to your one now that you've caught your breath, hopefully. So I should say Mothin is the co-deputy leader of the Green Party. He was elected over the summer to that position. So you were elected in 2022 as a Green councillor in what had been a Labour stronghold in Hare Hills near Leeds. You became, I think, somewhat kind of famous nationally after intervening to stop violence during the unrest. This wasn't during the riots last year, but it was kind of there was a period of unrest quite soon before that that had taken place there. And then a little over a year on, you were deputy leader or co-deputy leader of a national political party in England and Wales. So comparing your experiences of local politics and national politics, is there a difference between how you think Muslim voters are responding to the Green Party? Is it different locally from what it is nationally now that you've done both?
Just a quick thing, you said 2022, I was elected, 2024.
Sorry,
So,
you okay?
yeah,
Yeah.
and yeah, the riots last year sort of brought me into national spotlight.
Yeah.
But a lot of the local issues translate to national.
Mm-hmm.
So we have things like cost of living. Now, as a local councillor in a very deprived ward, so one of the poorest wards in Leeds, one of the poorest wards in the country, you still have people who are struggling to put food on the tables, to pay their bills. And that's not just a Leeds issue. You know, I'm a proud northerner. I very rarely used to come down to London. I'm very much a northern lad. And now I'm seeing the imagination of northerners is London's where all the wealth is. But when you get down here and you see some of the boroughs and you see some of the disparities, I was in Newham not so long ago where they're building loads of posh flats, loads of nice, lots of investments going in, lots of nice areas around the Olympic Village. But across the road, there's this estate called the Carpenter's Estate, where the council's actually trying to push residents out so they can redevelop it and turn it into lots of posh flats which are unsuitable for families. So you can see the gentrification taking place right in front of your eyes. So those housing issues, those issues around poverty, they're local to pretty much everywhere. And that's how the local issues, if you can't talk about local issues like that, national politicians sometimes forget the minutiae. Do you know that they're so involved in grandstanding that they forget how what they say impacts ordinary people and their lives. And that's what we've got to get back to. We've got to have politicians who are real, you know, people who are part and parcel of their communities, you know, people who are ingrained in their communities. That's something that we've lost, and something we need to get back to.
Cool. All right, thank you. Okay, so I've got a question for for the panelists. Please jump in, anybody who... I think I'd like to hear from all of you, actually, from this one. But so just for a bit of context, there's something like 20,000 local councillors in the UK. The Labour Muslim Network recently estimated that just 500 of those are Muslim, and about 75% of that number are in the Labour Party. Mothin, you're the only Muslim currently serving as leader or deputy of a major political party in England and Wales. So, to all of you, what are the barriers, do you think, to more Muslims becoming involved in politics, either locally or nationally or both? Anyone, please feel free to jump in.
Well, there's definitely barriers, yeah. I mean, I know there are barriers because every time I get to a certain level, I'm the first, which kind of shows the fact that there's the proof. You know, the first Muslim woman elected as a local councillor, one of the first Muslim women to be in the London Assembly, one of the first ethnic minority women to lead a group. And that just shows you that in this time and age, why am I still the first? So there's definitely barriers. Now, I would say that there are some increasing barriers now because of, I mean, I just do, you know, normal social media posts, and I did one recently which I thought I'd get sympathy for, which was about my local mosque getting attacked. And the stream of racist responses that I got about how I didn't belong, you know, that they were going to get me, you know, that and that kind of threatening kind of atmosphere puts even more people off from, you know, just generally, but specifically Muslim women as well.
You think people can see that and think, oh, this isn't for me because that will happen. Is that sort of...
It's something that I'm always kind of grappling with. Do I talk about it?
Yeah.
Will it put other people off?
Yeah.
Or do I talk about it to call it out so that it stops? And so we're at this kind of interesting time where we have to tell people it's happening, but we still want Muslims and women, I particularly want more women to stand. Yeah. Because without our voices, then we're completely lost.
How do we, to the other two of you, how do you think we can tackle that? What needs to change?
Well, look, I've never, I never planned to have, just even consider going into politics. This was not a plan. I always say to people, I've already got the best role in Wales. I have so much freedom in the fact that as General Secretary of TUC Cymru, I can be in so many different spaces, both legitimately as well. So for me, it's a case of I can see how things are going really wrong and they're going badly at the moment. And if somebody like me is being told, I mean, people are asking me, like, Shav, why are you, now of all times, where it feels so dangerous for women, let alone Muslim and BAME women, to go forward and consider going into politics, why are you picking this moment? Why didn't you pick the moment where it was going to be, you were going to get like a free ride in? And I was like, well, naturally I'm a fighter. I always say to people, I come from roots of fighters, right? So when we can see that something is difficult, we tend to gravitate towards the difficult because I think that there's, when you have a whole trade union movement, there's 47 different affiliated trade unions who have a debate and a discussion about what is going to happen with the Senate, and they look at me and say, we need you to go forward.
Yeah.
I think that is very, very telling. So for me, it's a case of there comes a point where you've got to pick a side and you've got to decide, are you going to be brave and move forward even when there are, like virtual bullets being fired at you, potentially, this is a very dangerous time almost for Muslims to go into these spaces. And especially when, you look around you and you think, like my children sat me down, I have a 14-year-old and a 12-year-old, and, they were like, has anyone done a risk assessment? And I'm thinking, my kids are asking me if there's been a risk assessment, has the police been in touch? Is our house marked? The fact that they even know these things, to sit me down and I'm going, no, actually that's a good point. And I'm thinking as an adult, as someone who advocates for other people and talks about health and safety all the time, do you know what I mean?
I've got a 12, 14-year-old, they said exactly the same thing to me. That's crazy.
Yeah.
And that's Mothin. What about you? Because you obviously entered politics fairly recently. Like, did you consider doing it before and you were put off by something, or?
So if we just go back to those barriers, I think if you just look at the sort of social breakdown of Muslim populations, is generally we are quite poor, right? And that's something that we shouldn't shy away from. We're from working class backgrounds, right? Poverty itself and that lack of opportunity because of poverty is a huge barrier. Like the first time I walked into the council chamber, I saw millionaires, people who are landlords, who are comfortable, who don't have to worry about where the next meal's coming from. They're the kind of people who the system is designed for. The system isn't designed for someone who has to work a full-time job to try and put food on the table and try and serve their community. So straight away, there's barriers stopping ordinary people, not just Muslims, but working class people from getting into politics. And then you've got to look at the way the political parties are made up. I used to be a Labour member, and it was easy in Labour circles is if they saw an area that had a large Muslim demographic, campaigning was something that they weren't really bothered about. What they'd do is they'd go in and speak to community leaders, or they'd speak to people of influence, and they wouldn't go and speak to ordinary people because they don't need to, because Muslims for so long have had nowhere else to turn to. They've been taken for granted. And that's where, as a community, we need to wake up. Whether it's the Greens, whether it's Labour, Lib Dems, whoever, if, as politicians, we're not speaking to you and talking about your issues, then you shouldn't vote for us. We should be fighting for every single vote, because every single person's life matters. And until politicians realise that, our system's going to continue to remain broken.
Yeah. So, Shav, it seems fair to bring you back at this point. The kind of suggestion. Sorry, you okay? You got some water? Yeah. So the suggestion that Labour has taken Muslim voters for granted, and you were talking about Wales's long history of Labour voting, and obviously we've just seen in the by-election in Caerphilly that being kind of upended. Although we can discuss the reasons that may or may not have happened in terms of tactical voting or otherwise, we'll come on to that. But would you agree that Labour's taken its Muslim voters for granted?
I think the data speaks for itself, isn't it? Poll after poll, I'd be stupid to deny it. And I think that it is absolutely right. Mothin is right. You know, if you're a politician, you need to be speaking. You need to be within the community. How else are you going to represent people's interests? I find that very bizarre anyway as a trade unionist. I can't just go ahead and, you know, make bold decisions or be on a platform.
Yeah.
So for me, that is integral. And I think that we also need to understand that politics is changing, and you know, we have got votes to 16-17. We had votes to 16-17. Look at Caerphilly. You know, you've just mentioned Caerphilly, and yes, there was most definitely tactical voting happening, but we also saw young people come out and vote. And they weren't just voting; they were knocking the doors as well, and they were organising. So for me, it's a case of we need to work across the different levels and different generations in order to work towards the best outcomes.
Yeah.
And, you know, progressive people, particularly in the Welsh Senate now going forward, are going to have to find a way of working together, because Wales is going to be the first test bed, for sure, for whether or not Reform can run a government and can actually step in. And the polling at the moment suggests that potentially they could get very close to being the majority party, which will mean then that the others will have to work together.
Okay, well, so let's talk about reform, because we're still, obviously, the dates are different in Wales and kind of the rest of the UK, but as you say, you know, at different levels, this is a party that could, based on polling, conceivably form governments in the coming years. Obviously, Muslim voters do not vote as a single bloc. All of the, you know, we know that all of the divisions between other people, you know, class, location, wealth, all of this stuff, you know, also applies to Muslim society. But, you know, if it is possible to talk about some broad trends, what influence do you think Reform's rise is likely to have on how Muslims vote? You know, is it potentially going to be something that could galvanise people into alternatives? Is there an opportunity in the fracturing of that two-party system? Like, I'm going to start with Mothin and Shav, but what do you guys think the effect on Muslim voters might be of Reform's surge?
First of all, when it comes to Reform, I think we've got to be clear that they are a far-right fascist party. You know, and the prospects of them getting into power is going to be disastrous for most people. You can see their narratives. The call to blood and the call to the ties to land and the ties to an external threat, and often it's people who look like the majority of us in this room that are the threat. That creates a strong narrative. And so far, the parties that should be resisting and pushing back against that are failing. We have Keir Starmer talking about an island of strangers. Echoing language of Enoch Powell, an echoing language. You can't out-reform by tracking what they do. People want an alternative. And if Labour are supposed to be the party of the working people, they still call themselves a socialist party. If they're supposed to be the party of the working people, where are those policies that are designed to unite communities and unite working people? You know, socialists have this famous saying, workers of the world unite. And so far we've got division.
So just to bring it back to the question about voters, what do you think is, you know, if they're seeing that, if they're seeing Reform and parties potentially echoing Reform in different areas, what are voters going to do you think? Muslim voters especially.
We've got to provide an alternative, and I'm from the Green Party. I've got to sort of represent what we're standing for, but we're finally giving a message to ordinary people. Do you know, there's an alternative here that is unashamedly ready to stand up to the fascists, that's ready to take the fight to the far right, and we've got to speak the language of the ordinary people. What is in the interests of the 1% versus the 99%?
So, Hina, I don't know, what do you think, like, what kinds of voting patterns do you think we might kind of see and why? Like, what kinds of things?
I think there's definitely a lot of attention on reform, isn't there, in the media? And yet when you actually see the results of recent by-elections, you've seen the Liberal Democrats beating reform in many of those by-elections that have just happened. So the alternative is there and it's winning. There's evidence of that. Every by-election that's just happened, there was a fantastic win just recently with a Liberal Democrat who, actually from Palestinian origins, she was able to bring people who had originally voted for a Reform councillor. He then resigned. She won that seat, a stonking result. So actually, I think it's really important that we try to remember why people are voting a certain way. And, you know, why did my Liberal Democrat councillor colleague win that election? It's because of the work that she was doing in the community. It's because of the way that she was speaking to the people. Those same people voted Reform before, went to Liberal Democrat. And I think there is an argument to say that what we need to do is move away from the polarisation that we're seeing in politics and actually go back down to the basics of what do people want to get from their politicians. They want people who are grounded, who are grassroots, who care about people and who want to make a real difference to their lives. And that's actually the genuine thing that everybody will tell you when you talk to them on the doors. Please make my life better.
So
Please work harder for me.
Shav, I'm going to flip that round slightly and ask kind of the opposite question, which is, and this is something that we talked about last week briefly when we had a chat, but is there a world actually in which reform could attract significant numbers of Muslim voters?
I think that if you look back at the fact that it was Farage who sold us Brexit, and if you remember as well, he was talking to everybody. The Leave campaign was talking to everybody at the time, and they talked to a lot of business owners. There was the Bangladeshi Catering Association, I believe, that they had some discussions with about the shortage of chefs, for example, and they promised them that, well, you know what, and because of Brexit, all of a sudden you will be able to add on chefs to the skilled list of people who can enter into the UK, and life would be so much easier for you. There were a number of people that voted Leave from Muslim communities, from Black and Asian ethnic minority communities. I worry right now as well that there are potentially some silent, quiet, reform-leaning support from Muslims as well. And we can see that as well in terms of, there's already, if you look at, you know, I mean, the co-leader for Reform is a Muslim himself. He talks about the fact that he's Muslim and therefore his colleagues, none of them can be racist because they're really nice people, and whichever one that he picks for the day, they're all really nice, they're really lovely, they didn't need the following things, and, you know, oh, it's just a bit awkward. It's almost like, but maybe he's just used to it. But I guess you can be used to it if you're rich, right? Because you can just be like, it's no big deal. But when it rubs against you on a day-to-day, it feels very, very different. You know, our experiences in the workplace, our experiences when we try and get on transport is very different. He gets to like have a driver probably that drives him around, and he probably sits in a sauna all day long. I mean, I don't know, but he is not the representation of what I believe is the everyday Muslim, is the everyday Black and Asian worker. And most people, for me, whether you're black or you're white in this country, what people want is a decent living, they want good housing, they want to feel safe and they want to feel secure. And, you know, talking about Labour, there are good things equally that they are looking to do. For example, the introduction of the Employment Rights Bill will genuinely be a game changer. If we can get rid of zero-hour contracts, insecure employment, for example, have day one rights, be able to have sick pay from day one, these are basic fundamental things that you would feel should happen anyway. But we saw, for example, during the pandemic, the fact that people never had those things, genuinely, it impacted them. And it was predominantly Muslim people, Black and Asian people who were on the front line, who were key workers at the time. And to talk about how Labour can do things differently, in Wales, whilst we had the Tories in charge in Westminster, in Wales when we had a Labour government, our First Minister at the time, we were having discussions with him almost on a daily basis. And one of the things that we found was that there was a high proportion of Black and Asian care workers, for example, who worked in social care, who were catching COVID, and because of the fact that they were agency workers, they weren't able to get sick pay from day one. We then negotiated with him that actually that the Welsh government would put in the extra money and those individuals would be able to access that support. We also went into the fact that there were more and more people who, for example, were working in food processing. And so we had a further investigation to find out, well, why are more people who work in those plants, for example, catching COVID? And we found that, well, a lot of these individuals were migrant workers. They were living and working together, often having to like swap, doing a shift in a bed, for example, like swapping over. The same experiences that lots of like people like my father experienced, when he first arrived in 1958 and 1968. Though, people still live like that.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's a case of, there are a number of things that I think that Labour have got wrong to begin with, but I think that there's a lot of good that they can still do. But for me, going forward, particularly in Wales, because the Senedd is going to be changing, the shape of the Senedd is going to change, my number one priority is going to be keeping reform out of any political kind of like key position.
Yeah, okay. So, question for all of you. We polled British Muslims a year and a half ago to find out how they were going to vote and what kinds of issues were important to them, what was influencing their vote. Lots of things in there that you would recognise from polling anybody: NHS, cost of living, housing. One thing that did come up was Palestine as well. I think it was the most commonly chosen top issue for people, but it was still only 20% of people chose it. So it's important, but it's not the only thing. That's been a key issue for Muslims in the UK for decades, but it's clear that something has changed about how central it is to British politics. Do you think that shift is permanent? Is Gaza going to remain like a central, or Palestine generally?
I think it's been an eye-opener for a lot of people.
Yeah.
People who typically wouldn't be engaged with political, with politics, have suddenly found themselves involved because they've found an issue that has been so disgusting to everyone. Watching a genocide unfold right in front of our eyes. Little children turned into mincemeat by weapons that are supplied from Western nations, including this one. And I think that's a point that a lot of people are never going to turn back from. Yes, there are other issues, and people are going to talk about those other issues, and they are very important. But if we're just focusing on this one, I think this has been so egregious to so many people that then they'll never turn back. I still hear so much anger directed towards the main parties for not speaking out, for not taking action to stop it, still supplying arms, even now. This country has been complicit, this Labour government has been complicit.
Hina, what do you think? I don't know if you, perhaps even thinking back to the effect of the Iraq invasion in 2005, and obviously that's often compared with this as a sort of political moment. Yeah.
The Liberal Democrats have always been a party that have upheld international human rights, international law, which is why we were so vocal against the Iraq war. And I remember, being part of that campaign in the anti-war movement back then. There was also equally demonstrations then about Palestine too that I was involved with. The difference now is that I think that back then when I was campaigning about Palestine, we didn't have it in our phones every day.
Yeah.
The difference has been that now it is the visual images that you're getting constantly on your phone with social media. That has changed the way we see this situation. The world has become a smaller place. And I think, I mean, the Liberal Democrats from day one have been saying that we should never sell arms to any country that breaks international law. So we were always against Israel sale of arms. We called out the genocide. We've, been campaigning for Palestine to have statehood. We've got the only Palestinian MP in Parliament with Palestinian heritage, Layla Moran, who's been campaigning on this from the moment she got elected. So we've always been on that page. I think that the difference now is that when I was doing the campaigns and the protests back in the day, the protests were a lot smaller. Now the protests are larger. There is a larger demographic. There's a real mixture of people who are now getting involved. Yeah. Before it was just very student-led. Before. Now we're seeing pensioners, who are campaigning. Yeah. That's a completely different look that I've never thought I'd see. And that means there is definitely a shift. There is more understanding of what is going on internationally. There's more of a need for people to see their government listening, but also the other shift that I think is worrying is the fear that our rights are being removed, rights to protest, for example. And I think that has now also made people feel that need to call out the government more, call out the hypocrisy more. Yeah. And we're seeing that shift. I think that is going to actually change the whole political spectrum going forward.
There's an interesting question there, because you mentioned, as you rightly said, these protests, the movement against what's happening, all of it is attracting people from a lot of different backgrounds. But is there a double standard there, do you think, for for Muslim politicians in particular? And does this go back to one of the questions about barriers we were talking about? Because you see, we talked about the independent MPs, some of these will stand up in Parliament, we'll talk about genocide, and they're painted by parts of the press as, their concerns are all internationalist. There's questions about, loyalty to Britain, all of this sort of thing. Obviously, there is a reason that those people are being singled out and not others. Do you feel like that is something extra that Muslim politicians have to sort of contend with when speaking out?
I think that's always going to be the case.
I think I'm going to draw in from my own experiences. After I got elected, the Daily Mail ran, I think, 4 or 5 front pages on me as the Gaza councillor. So an extra element of scrutiny for the fact that I have this on my face and I'm unashamedly Muslim, I said Allahu Akbar after I won my election and I was vilified for that. And I'll say Allahu Akbar 100 times a day, I don't care. Do you know, this is part and parcel of who we are. It's not a time for us to be ashamed of who we are. We're part and parcel of this country. I keep telling people, Keir Starmer talks about his dad being a tool maker, but my dad actually made the steel that made the tools. Right? Our parents, our grandparents came over here to literally build this country back up after the Second World War. And when people tell us to go home, we are home. We're not going anywhere. But just on the Gaza thing, there's and I'll draw my experiences. So Labour, in the council after I got elected, I said Allahu Akbar and I dedicated my victory to the people of Gaza. So in the council chamber in Leeds, the Conservatives, the Labour Party, the Liberal Democrats teamed up to sort of vilify that and call protests hate marches. And our Liberal Democrat councillors did. This is one of the things that Liberal Democrats try to do is they sit between, they like to sit and go unnoticed and then pop up and say, we're the good guys.
I'm gonna slightly just jump in because what you're saying, fair, but this isn't. I kind of want to avoid this being a hustings event because this could be people just trying to sell their parties, and I think you've all got more backgrounds than that to talk about. So I take the point, but yeah.
Thank you.
But I don't know, how are we doing for time? 5 minutes? Yeah. So something else I'd like to speak about, just kind of, keeping on that question of Muslim voters and what's important to them and what forces might be influencing how they vote. It's now 6 years plus since we had the APPG on British Muslims that came up with what was supposed to be a definition of Islamophobia to put into the statute books. That's been kind of rescinded and watered down at various points. It's no longer statutory. The definition itself has now been binned, and there's a new working group that's reported on one. It's now being reported that doesn't contain the word Islamophobia at all. So how important is that work, do you think, and is it ever going to happen?
Well, the APPG definition was a cross-party definition. And I'm really, I am proud of that. The Liberal Democrats were the first party to adopt the definition. I am disappointed that we're here now. I think that the problem, one of the main problems that I think that we're facing is that when the definition was first accepted at that point of the APPG, there wasn't a government instant acceptance of it, and that's why we're here right now. And it now means that every time I say, it's Islamophobia Awareness Month, as many of you know, every time I talk about Islamophobia, well, there's no such thing as Islamophobia. That's the instant attack that I get every time I talk about it. I think that we need to move on to the fact that the government, and I really hope the Labour government, and I'm glad that you've got the faith ministers coming in today, do ask him about this, because we've just got to accept the fact that there is Islamophobia happening. It's the 19% increase that have been shown in Home Office results at the moment, data at the moment. This whole kicking the can down the road about the definition is actually harming people's lives. I know that even though there is this 19% increase that has been shown in the Home Office data, that's just the tip of the iceberg. It took me 5 incidents of somebody attacking me for being a Muslim before I reported my first crime. That is a reality. I am tired of this. I am tired of the fact that the government don't care.
Yeah.
And one of the things I've been pushing for in the London Assembly, and then after the riots, there was a real fear that went across, even here in London, that we were going to get far-right extremists coming to attack us in our homes. My husband said we're not going out that day. And I was calling for protection of mosques immediately afterwards. It took a few days before any MP or leader even suggested it. And then I noticed that the Mayor of London went and did lots of photo opportunities with mosque leaders, etc. afterwards, and went and spoke to community leaders, and it was great that he did that. And they all said, can we make sure there's Islamophobia awareness training across London? So TfL, particularly because there's a lot of hate crime when we travel. Metropolitan Police, as you've probably all seen the Panorama documentary, big problem there. We needed to make sure there was training across board, and he did say that he was going to do that. Nothing's happened. I've done FOIs, I've done mayor's questions, I've said, where's the Islamophobia training? Nobody seems to take it seriously. And that is my issue. We're all grappling about the definition, but what are we doing? What action is happening in any institution to deal with Islamophobia? Nothing. And yet I've had anti-Semitism training 3 times.
Yeah. Would you, Shaf, would you agree with that?
So the TUC didn't actually take on that definition, the reason being that there was a range of different views in terms of how people felt. So the TUC will often switch between using 2 different terms. One is the term that many people now use, which is anti-Muslim hatred, and Islamophobia. Islamophobia to describe the systemic discrimination aspect, and then the anti-Muslim hatred, or Muslim hatred, which is literally your day-to-day experience in your face, when you're traveling and so forth. For me, it's a case of you can provide all the training that you want, you can provide the best definition. Is that going to change anything? Yeah. And for me, that is always my number 1 priority. is that we could invest in lots of different things. I mean, look, we had 9/11, then we had 7/7. I was one of, I was a lot younger then. I was involved in one of the groups that the government had set up specifically looking at women and the experiences of women, Muslim women at the time, post 7/7, what we were feeling, what we were doing. We had a whole big kind of Muslim women talk campaign that ran across the whole of the UK. The experiences were very, very similar across the board. Has anything changed? Did anything change after that? Has anything changed since then? So for me, it's a case of we can do those things, but unless people who experience this on a day-to-day are in the right spaces to be speaking up. And also I find it quite uncomfortable then as well, where it all depends on who is around the table and who gets to define that definition. And do Muslims actually get asked? Like, is there ever a referendum for Muslims to say, right, do you agree with the following definition? I think that there's a lot of people who feel like they get excluded from these conversations, particularly, for example, if you are from the LGBT plus Q plus community, for example, or if you are maybe you practice in a certain way, etc., or not even, although you still see yourself as a Muslim. So I think it's extremely varied. I think it is important. It is important, but the question then becomes if they haven't accepted the definition, is there something that we're then missing? Is there something going on that we're currently blind to?
Yeah.
Do we need to be around another table where the real stuff's going on?
Okay. I think we're at time, so I'm going to wrap it up, but thank you so much, all of you, for your contributions, Mothin, Hina, Shav. Really appreciate it. I'm going to, I think, move you all on for a quick coffee break next door. Yeah, I'm getting a thumbs up for that. So please leave the room by both exits. This exit only. Get a cup of tea, and we'll see you back here in about 10 minutes.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Congratulations on your work.
Everyone to take a seat, get comfortable. Hello. A little bit of housekeeping. Thank you, everyone. Let's start. We have some space at the front. Can I ask, we have people standing at the back. Can everyone move forward a little bit, if possible? If you can move forward a table, that would be great. Thank you. Can I ask a few more people to move forward a little bit, if you can? Thank you. All right, let's get started. Just one bit of housekeeping from me. Please remember to follow us on social media. Our Instagram account is online-, and on X we are online- as well. Great. I would like to introduce to the stage our next panel chair and panelists. This discussion is Success on the Field, Muslim Contributions to the World of Sport. Chairing is my colleague Saman Javed, Hyphen reporter. Participants are Zainab Alema, rugby player, Sahiba Majid, Data and Insights Manager at the Muslim Sport Foundation, Jawahir Robel, football coach and referee. Am I missing anyone? Sorry? And Nalette Tucker. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, morning everyone, and thank you for the introduction, Burhan. I'm just going to go through and just introduce everyone briefly. So this is Nalette to my left, and then next to her we've got Sahiba Majid, Zainab Alema and Jawahir Robel. I'm going to ask each of our guests to just tell us a bit about themselves and their career to date. So Jawahir, if I could start with you.
Why do you have to pick me first? I'm joking. Hi everyone, my name is Jawahir Robel. Why is my tail like this? Anyways, my name is Jawahir Robel. I am a football referee. I'm based in London. I coach, play, and I work in a school supporting kids with special needs.
And Zainab, on to you.
Assalamu alaikum everybody, my name is Zainab Alema, also known as the Bulldozer. I'll talk to you about that in a bit later. It's a bit too early to talk about that. I'm a rugby player. I'm a mother of three. I'm also a qualified neonatal intensive care nurse, but mainly just focusing on rugby at the moment. And I coach and also play, and I was the first hijabi Muslim woman to play in the Premiership.
And Zainab currently plays for Richmond.
Yeah, I forgot about the aspect.
And then next up, we've got Sahiba from the Muslim Sports Foundation.
Assalamu alaikum, my name's Sahiba. I'm the Data and Insight Manager at the Muslim Sports Foundation, so I basically just drive a lot of the theoretical analysis and then develop that into potential opportunities to develop sports for British Muslim communities. And on the side of that, I'm also a secondary PE teacher. I'm born and bred in Peterborough, which you've probably seen in the news this week for all the wrong reasons. But that's what it is.
And Nalette, could I ask you to tell us a bit about Sunnah Sports?
Yeah, so I founded Sunnah Sports back in 2014. I accepted Islam in 2010, and I went from playing netball, hockey, football, everything, to pretty much overnight not being able to play because hijab wasn't in the rule book back then. So you couldn't play and wear hijab at that time. So because I'd done my degree in sports coaching, the next best thing was to set up something where Muslim women could participate, removing those barriers for them. So that was the sort of theory behind Sunnah Sports. And we still, today, so it'll be 12 next year, we still do sessions for Muslim women, but we also moved into disability sport about 7 years ago as well.
Thank you. I think it would be great to hear from each of you about what inspired you to get into sport in the first place. So Jawahar, if we could start with you again.
So what inspired me to be in football in general, before the refereeing, I would say I was born in a country called Somalia. It's literally personally, I would say is one of the most beautiful African countries. It was 2000, I think, when we decided, we wanted to find out ways to leave the country because, the civil war broke out. But before that, I remember playing football with the boys at the beach. There's a famous beach in Somalia called Lido Beach. Like, it's turquoise, the sky is blue, the sand is literally white. It's so beautiful. I remember playing football there straight after school. And I remember asking my parents, is there a national team for the women's, the men's have a national team. Do the women's have a national team? And my dad was like, if you're really good, you can play for the men's team. And then I was like, no, that's not true. But anyways, we relocated in England, the home of football, Wembley. That was our first home. And literally the first thing I researched was England women's team. And I was like, yes, I can see myself there. And that dream continued up until I was in secondary school. I got scouted to play for QPR. And I took the letter to my mum, and she said, how long is the drive? 4 hours. She said, yeah, that's not going to happen. I was like, why? So I continued playing in secret. And if no one's going to take you to a trial or get seen by someone who's professional, you're not going to make it as a player. So that dream died. And I was like, if I can't play, I want to coach. So I did my coaching badges, and I started coaching the girls in my area, my sister's kids, friends. And then I ended up making a big team. And then I was like, oh, now that I'm a coach, I want to take it serious. I got asked to shadow a coach, and that was going really well until one day a lady came up to me and she said, that pitch over there doesn't have a referee. Do you want to help out? And I said, I've never done refereeing in my life. What's that alarm? Oh. Okay, no problem. We'll wait. I'll sing while we wait.
I'm not part of the act, I promise.
It's okay.
Keep your eyes, my little girl. Keep your eyes, my.
So JJ, the pitch needed a referee.
Yeah, you remembered. Anyways, the pitch needed a referee, thank you. The pitch needed a referee, and they asked me to referee. I love football, but I've never refereed. I always thought, refereeing is for white middle-aged men. Again. Let's go home. Okay. I hope that's the last. No. Anyways, I got asked to referee. They gave me a whistle, a jacket. I remember it was a raining Saturday. And then it started off as a volunteering for just that one day. It ended up for a whole year. I was like, did these people forget me here? I'm supposed to be a coach. I can't referee. But refereeing allowed me to go back on the pitch because my parents are like, no one looks like you. You're going to get racially abused. People are not going to take you serious. So instead of you playing, just coach at least, But I said, if refereeing allows me to do this, please at least support the refereeing. You made me miss the playing, let me referee. I had that conversation, they still said no. Until one day, this team, the men's team I was refereeing, the gentleman, I think one of the guys that was playing, he came up to me and he said, you're a really good referee. My dad works for Daily Telegraph. Can I pass your details on to him? I said, of course, come on. And then my neighbor knocked. It was an Irish lady, so nice. And she's like, we opened them, me and my mum opened, she's like, your daughter's on the newspaper. And I was like, that's an amazing way for them to find out that I referee. And ever since, we just continue.
And Jawahar's being modest. In 2023, she was awarded an MBE for her services to football. So, Zainab, what inspired you to get into rugby?
For me, it was at school actually. My PE teachers inspired me. I had no idea that women even played rugby. At the time, I was 14 years old, and she brought some rugby balls in. She was like, right, girls, for PE today, we're going to do rugby. And I remember being the only one who was buzzing. Like, all my peers were like, no, miss, like, I don't want to get on the floor, I don't want to get dirty. And I was like, yeah, come on, miss, let's do it. So I remember just getting the ball in hand, running, and I just thought, oh my goodness, where's this sport been all my life? It was almost like a cliche, instant love of the game. But my parents, they had two, not really opposing views. So my mum, classic mum, I don't want you to get injured. She was really worried about getting injured because she knew that rugby is a physical sport. My dad, on the other hand, said that rugby is a man's sport. Why do you want to play rugby? Rugby is an elitist sport. And at the time, I think it's because of representation. Because he didn't see, I don't think he even knew women played rugby, but he just thought of my black Muslim daughter wants to play rugby, like where's this coming from? But he never said no, and because he never said no, I just continued playing. And I think similar to you, like I feel like with my parents, when they saw that I was passionate about it and I loved it, and I was making a bit of headlines through it, they were like, okay, almost as if they wanted to see something tangible that came out of the choice to play rugby. But I didn't join my first club until I was 17 years old. I played for Ealing Childfinders in West Ealing. That was my first club. At the time, I didn't really know that I was different because I just loved the game until I went to university. I was like, oh my God, I'm the only black person on my team, number one. I'm the only Muslim person on my team. So it was like, from different angles, I was just completely different. And we'll probably get into the barriers a bit later. But for me, what I love about rugby is the physicality. And a lot of people feel like that's what people run away from, but I love it. If tomorrow they were to say to me, Zainab, no more contact in rugby, I'll literally walk away. Like, I just love the physicality. And for me, when people talk about rugby, and I say that for me, it's similar to Islam. And when I say that, people are like, what? And I'm like, let me finish. And for me, I say, so if you look across my teammates, everyone is different. There's a lot of people on my team that I probably wouldn't talk to outside of rugby just because I wouldn't have the experience and the opportunity to. We're all coming together to play rugby, to win the game from different backgrounds, different shapes, different sizes. If you look on the rugby pitch, nobody looks the same. And then we're all coming together, but also in Islam, we all come together. Even if you look across this room, everyone's coming from different backgrounds, different areas to worship Allah, and we all have that one goal. And for me, the values of rugby was huge. Discipline, respect is huge in Islam. Like the discipline to fast during Ramadan, to pray 5 times a day, all requires discipline. And respect is huge. Respect your elders, your community. As well in rugby, you have to respect the referee. It's a huge thing in rugby, and your teammates as well. So there were a lot of similar values. So for me, it made sense for me to be a rugby player. But when I explain it in that, people are like, okay, I get you now. So yeah, that's sort of my journey.
I think we all want to know, where did the nickname the Bulldozer come about?
I was going to save that to last.
Okay.
Yeah, let me save that to last. It's too early.
Saiba, could I come to you next?
Yeah, I mean, what inspired me, I guess, growing up, I always kind of played sport, especially at school, and it was more the thrill of being part of something that I really enjoyed. But as I got older, especially as I became a teenager, and I think for me, my mum and dad were working a lot, and that's probably representative of a lot of young people around about my age. So they weren't really existent in terms of our education. So we kind of chose what we wanted to do. I never had my parents telling me, no, you can't do this, but they also never supported it either. But it's not until I got older and I realised that sense of belonging and that excitement was going from me, then I thought, I think I need to do something to allow future people to kind of feel that and stay in that moment. So I went on to do PE at university because I thought, yeah, going to become a PE teacher, incorporate sport, incorporates helping people. Did my masters in PE, done my masters, realised don't want to do PE. But what I meant by that was I felt like there was a much bigger movement that I wanted to be part of, and hence why I did the Muslim Sports Foundation stuff on the side. So I am still a PE teacher, but I do that as my kind of, it's my main thing, but it's also it's not my priority in the sense where my Muslim Sports Foundation is I want to make change and I want to lead the change. And what inspires me is when I see the work that I do with Muslim Sports Foundation and delivering, stuff that I do and then incorporating it back into my school and watching those young people have a different PE experience, especially girls, to what I did and enjoy it. Because for me, it's about being physically active. And I know we've got sport and we've got physical activity, but I'm really passionate about grassroots. And if I can get people physically active, I can then get people into sport. And if I can make physical activity a part of day-to-day life as a social prescription for young people, for women, for elderly, for SEND, then we can start having that different conversation about sport. So that's what inspires me, to develop that grassroots opportunities to make physical activity and movement such a norm within British Muslim communities as a foundation to then develop elite sports stars. Yeah.
Thank you. And Nolette?
So I have ADHD and I wasn't diagnosed till I was nearly 19. And so at school I was the kid that couldn't sit still and was a pain in the backside for all of her teachers. So the sports department was literally the safe haven. It was the place where as soon as I got a ball in my hand at netball or football, I was literally, everything just went quiet in my head, and that was the safest space to be. So I threw myself into literally playing every sport that I could across the school calendar and then externally as well. And it was literally just a safe space as a kid. And I then later on got into coaching and realised that actually I was a better coach than a player. That was a hard thing to accept. I was like determined I was going to play alongside Kelly Smith at some point, but didn't happen. So yeah, it was the place where I thought I can pass this on and I can give that safe space to a heck of a lot more people by being a coach than I could a player, and just being able to impact people's lives in that way was a different type of feeling.
Thank you. Jawahar and Zainab, I'm going to come to you next. I want to know how you balance your sporting career with your day-to-day lives. I know both of you do different things outside of sport as well.
You want to go?
I'll go. So, being a referee is a high-demand job right now because players are getting fitter. Especially in the women's game, I would say before they would have like 2 jobs to make ends meet, but now they've all got professional contracts. That means they have to train, eat well, and just focus on their football. So the referees also have to match that energy. And I've decided to be in this role, and this is what I want. So I also have to change my lifestyle, which is get to the gym, get a personal trainer, go to physiotherapy here as much as I can, stop eating chicken and chips as much as I can. That was not hard. That was really difficult to cut, but it was good. And so I'll go to school. I work in a school, so start at 8:30 and then finish at 4:30. Normally, I would just go straight to the gym, go home, rest, and then all the gym. So it's just like it's day job and then it's a referee in the weekend. So I have to make sure that I'm staying fit, I'm staying hydrated, and I'm studying the game, and yeah, enjoying the whole process.
For me, I think family's been my rock. Like, there's no way I'd be doing what I've been doing without my family. Alhamdulillah, like, they've supported me in unmanageable ways. Obviously, I've got 3 children, like I said, so that's a full-time job in its own. I'm sure you agree, even having that responsibility. But for me, I feel like because I have such a good support network, it allows me to be able to dabble in other things. So I'll say like general day-to-day. So in terms of in general for a week, we train 3 times a week. We play on the weekends, and then gym-in is 3 times a week as well. And because I'm one of like the position that I play as a prop, we're sort of the bigger players on the pitch, so gym-in is quite important. And yeah, chicken and chips is something that I like as well, so sometimes it's a bit tricky. But I think for me, it's just having that support network. And the kids, they don't give a toss, really. Like, you can play, like, I play on a Sunday, and in the morning, I'm doing a school run, and I'm, like, walking like a crab and trying to make sure everyone's safe going to school. And they just see me as their mum, which I am, obviously, but they don't really, they see me in that light. And I like the fact that I have those 2 sides. Sometimes I feel like I'm Hannah Montana. I'm leading 2 different lives. And I go on a school run, and none of the mums Oh, where? Actually, I got found out one day, actually. It was a school sports day. And, you know, this was not this year, the year before. And it was school sports day, and obviously, like, that's like my favourite day. Even when I was a child, I loved sports day, and I was like, okay, this is my child's sports day, not mine. I need to just rein it in a little bit. But we went to the field, and I said to my daughter, are they going to do like a parents' race? And I'm not sure, I didn't know. And I was like, okay, maybe I won't sort of plan for it, let me just go. So I wasn't in my trainers. And then they said, oh, parents' race. And I wasn't going to do it. I generally wasn't going to do it. But when I saw all the mums lining up, I was like, you know when you just get that competitive? I got so competitive. I was like, no, I need to go. But I'm not wearing any trainers. And I stood on the line. I was like, you know what? Take my shoes off. Took my shoes off, barefooted. And it was probably about 70 metres. It wasn't 400. It was about 70 metres. On your marks, get set. I just remember this running for my life, running. And I won. And I was like, I had to have won, because it would be so embarrassing. But it was proper Princess Diana style. I don't know if you've ever seen that, like barefooted running. And teachers were like, there's something going on here. Like, the way this woman ran, there's something going on. So they did a quick Google search, and they found out I played rugby. And then, yeah, the cat was at the back, and, oh, you have to come and speak at our school, you have to inspire the kids and stuff like that. So now every sports day, they always expecting me to stand on the line. Like this year, they're like, yeah, get on the line. And then I won again, so I have to keep that going, otherwise, yeah.
Those poor mums, they didn't know they were up against Natalie. Yeah. Do your kids play rugby with you?
No, it's the eldest, who's 9. She considered it, and I would never force them to do it, whether they want. And they come and watch me play, and there was in particular game she came to watch me play, and one of my teammates got a bloody nosebleed. It wasn't from a collision, but I think she just gets a nosebleed. And she was just put off. She's like, Mum, I don't think I can do this. I'm like, that's fine. I'm not going to force you. It's fine. But my youngest, she's a bulldozer. She definitely can play rugby. I won't force her, but she's definitely, I can see she's got all the skills. She's a tough nut, that one.
She's bulldozer junior.
Yeah.
Nalette and Saiba, I wanted to come to you next. I wondered if you could share a bit about, through your work, what are the barriers that you see for Muslim women in sport?
This is my bread and butter, this is. So if you look at it like theoretically, if any of you have heard of like the theory of intersectionality and all that kind of stuff, that you're a female, then you're a female of a different background, and then of a different religion, race, etc., economic status. There's so many things that influence Muslim women. A lot of it is socioeconomic. If we look at census data, a lot of Muslim communities live in the top 10 most deprived areas within the UK. So that's a foundational issue everywhere. Accessibility, location, transport, all them socioeconomic issues are massive. But then when we actually look at more specific issues, it's representation, it's feeling safe, a safe space. Now, because I know all of this, and this was an opportunity I was given through my school, funding's a massive issue. Now, funding to get people who are active only lasts 6 weeks. They're not long-term programs, which is something that I'm constantly asking for. So I was given a 6-week opportunity, and I just wanted to show my school that, you know, for community use, got some funding, did some 6 weeks of badminton for female women. Didn't make it specifically for Muslim women, but made it a female Muslim, an environment fit for Muslim female, i.e. Female coaches. If they wanted to pray, there's just a space on the side, no photography, consent, they could wear whatever they want, as long as they came and was active and comfortable. I had 82 people sign up in a sports hall that only catered for 30 people, so health and safety went out the window, I'm not going to lie. But it shows that if we do it right, the demand is there. That's the barriers. The barriers are we're not doing it right. And one of the first thing is making sure that these projects are long-term investments as opposed to just 6-week opportunities to tick diversity and inclusion quotas, which unfortunately happens way too much in sports. Making them long-term investments and having them developed by people who are representative of that community will go a very, very long way. And they're the biggest barriers, to be fair, socioeconomic and representation, role modelling. See it in young people, see it in women a lot of the times, doing stuff about it, but until the bigger NGB kind of picture or Sport England picture don't say, actually, do you know what, here's 2 years worth of full-time investment, we can't do much about it, like in that sense. But yeah, that's the barriers.
Thank you. And Nalette, would you like to add to that?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of extra ones that I think fit into that as well. Is that so? Yesterday I met a older guy in the car park who was providing our shipping containers. I don't just meet older men in car parks. And he said to me, he's like, "Why have you got that on your head?" So I was like, oh, "Here we go." So I was like, "Oh, I'm Muslim, that's why." And he was like, "But you're white." It's like, been white for 35 years, but thank you for pointing that one out. So I was like, "Yep, I'm white." He was like, "But white people aren't Muslim." So standing in front of you. So I think what usually happens largely within Sports England and a lot of national governing bodies is that Muslims are still categorised into the South Asian category. So when it comes to funding or it comes to participation, people are still looking to engage the South Asian community. The Muslim community from Sports England's last data was that the Muslim community, the most inactive faith community. I'm a picture of that we don't all fit into the South Asian barrier, so into the South Asian category. So when you've got marketing and specific data pointing at getting South Asian people active, and that's where a lot of the different advertising and marketing goes, that's why then a portion of the Muslim community aren't then collected into that. So it's about one, acknowledging British Muslims as opposed to looking at a South Asian narrative only. So how do we better engage British Muslims within sports? And then secondly, the barrier, I think, transcends grassroots. It goes more into then elite sport. So from a grassroots perspective, I've been a coach now for, nearly 20 years, and there are people that are active, and these guys are a brilliant example of that. The Muslim community are doing things, and at a grassroots level, they are very active. But when it comes to elite level sport, we don't see the same representation, and that comes to player pathways, and that comes to rule books that we still have a large majority of rule books that aren't inclusive of Muslim attire. So things like hijab are only named in a few of the rule books. So there are still sports that would exclude you. So if I want to play at Wimbledon, I'm not going to be able to get that opportunity right now because I have to wear a white skirt and a white top. There's no room for my hijab, and there's no room for me to cover any other part of my body. So it's important that we start looking and opening the discourse to why are those things still a barrier? What is going to stop you from playing tennis? Because there are hijab-wearing tennis players. They've not made it to as high as some of the other female tennis players. Obviously, we've got an amazing example of Ons Jabbar, who became Wimbledon runner-up twice. So there are Muslim players that are getting onto elite pathways, but we're still not seeing a representation across everybody who wants to practice in different formats. So we should be able to practice what we want as well as being able to take part in sport. That should be a key fundamental by now. In 2025, we shouldn't be saying we can't play sport because I have to cover my legs or because I have to cover my head. That shouldn't still be a conversation.
Yeah. Thank you. We're going to come back to that gap between the grassroots and professional level in a few minutes. JJ and Zainab, could you maybe talk to us a bit about your lived experience? I know, Zainab, you've talked to me about the kind of difficulties with the social culture of rugby and the kind of challenges you face there.
Yeah. So rugby, one of the things that I found shocking when I went to university, that's when all the barriers started creeping through the woodwork. So I'm like, where does this all come from? The drinking was huge. So rugby players love a pint, and I don't. So that was quite tricky to sort of get around. I was constantly trying to think about how do I bond with my teammates if I don't drink alcohol. And so things like play of the match. So after a game, whoever plays the best, you get play of the match. And that's basically you versus the opposition player of the match. And you basically drink a pint, and whoever wins, that's another sort of a game after the game. And back when I was in university, I used to win that quite a lot. And I was tooting my own horn, yeah. I played, I was decent. And so I used to have to stand there in front of everyone and reject the pint because I don't. And then they'll be like, okay, nominate someone else. I'm like, but I don't even want to nominate someone else. So that went on for a good, let's say, 2 years when I was in university. My final year in university, I think the pin must have dropped and people realised that I didn't drink. And I won player of the match again, and they said, I think the captain must have had a chat with the teammates, like, Zainab doesn't drink, we have to give her something non-alcoholic. And I think it was like a Sprite or something. And apparently it's actually harder to down a fizzy drink than it is to down a beer. Obviously, I would never know that. But I was like, okay, now that I'm involved, but in the halal way, I guess, because I'm not drinking alcohol, I've got to win this. So obviously down the pint of lemonade, then I won. And they're like, wow, Zee, imagine if you did drink. I'm like, yeah. So that was like a way that that was like over 10 years ago, but I remember it to this day, because the way that they felt, they allowed me to feel included without me compromising my values. And things like sports hijab. When I started playing, there was no sports hijabs, and I thought, I didn't even know I was allowed to play rugby in the hijab, because I never researched it. And there was one incident where my hijab came off while I was playing rugby. Oh, mortifying. My hair was messy as well, so even worse. And so I was on a wing, and I was running down the wing, and I scored a try, so I scored, and I got up, and I thought, oh, I could feel like wind, you know, and I thought, this doesn't feel right. And my teammates were looking at me like in shock, and I'm like, what's going on? And I looked like 20 meters down, my hijab was like somewhere on the floor, and I was like, oh my goodness. So I just ran back, put it back on, and then continued playing. But I was like, I need to think of a hack, because this can't keep happening. So I invested in sports hijab and the scrum cap. So a scrum cap is kind of like a padded helmet. It's quite soft. I wear over my sports hijab, but fastens Velcro underneath my chin. So then I'd never had that incident. So I guess wherever there's a will, there's a way. Yes, it was a barrier for me, but I was able to overcome it by wearing a scrum cap. So if you see any of my videos playing rugby, I'm always wearing a scrum cap. And people think it looks normal, because rugby players wear scrum caps, especially if you play in the front row, which I do. But I purely wear it to keep my hijab on. But people don't really know. So, you know, that's sort of one of the barriers that I faced. The drinking, the sort of attire, obviously I wear base layers underneath. But I was actually speaking to someone recently, a hijabi sister, who was thinking that she doesn't know if she wants to continue playing rugby. And when I asked her, you know, what's the reason, she was talking about their tie, like she's not comfortable in wearing shorts, which is fair enough. And I think that's definitely becoming more topic of discussion in terms of what to wear. Like Nilette says, in 2025, we should have alternative, as long as you're not harming anyone else and it's safe, why not? Why can't you wear tracksuit bottoms? And I know Ikra Ismail had an issue recently about a referee, I think, told her that she couldn't play because she wasn't wearing shorts. But she's been playing in shorts for a long time, and in tracksuits for a long time. Nobody's ever said anything. And it doesn't take away her ability to play football. So if she can do it, why can't other sports do it? So I think it's definitely something that I would like to take away into rugby, because I know there's a lot of Muslim women who like to play rugby, but maybe the shorts and what we wear is really putting them off.
Jawahir?
The difficulties I faced at the beginning would be going into an environment where I don't belong. But because I love football, I did belong. But other people think that I'm intruding them. And there was one incident when I was refereeing, right at the beginning, I was refereeing the under-14 games, like a boys' game. I remember the game went really well. I refereed, both teams were happy. But I could hear one of the parents saying, why do we have a hijab-wearing referee? Where are the guys? And I didn't think much of it, because I knew I didn't know where to go, who to report to, because I was just at the beginning of my refereeing career. Another parent heard it, and he came up to me and he said, don't let that parent get away with what they said. And I said, can you help me? Can you help me report this? And we contacted the county FA, and we managed to get that parent what they deserved, which is a ban for their child, and also them. They couldn't play for that team anymore. And I felt sorry for the child, but the parent, no way they could be on that pitch again. And the other difficulty was the hijab as well, because I remember playing with these kind of big hijabs, and when you're refereeing, you get hot so quickly, if you're doing any sports in general. And I was struggling, and then Nike contacted me, and they said, we're thinking of making a sports hijab, you know, where it's technology, the sweat-proof and everything. And I said, you guys chose me to be part of this conversation. That's actually amazing. And they said, yes, we want you to be an ambassador. We want you to be part of this conversation. I said, yes, very nice. Put me down. And till this day, they're just working so hard to make sure that female referees or female sports are enjoying the sports. and they're feeling comfortable.
Can I just quickly add to that, just quickly, about clothing? So
Yeah.
I'm a PE teacher by day, and what we see is the flexibility of clothing is not just a young Muslim issue, it's a girl issue.
Yeah.
And I'll give you an example. So we offer swimming in year 7 and year 8. And what we see is the dropout levels in females as they get into year 8, when they realise they're becoming teenagers and becoming really self-conscious, is that the girls who are wearing the burkinis happily go into the pool, but the girls that, or non-Muslim girls who then are worrying about showing skin, are then not participating. And it just shows that actually the flexibility of clothing can benefit all girls. Yeah.
Thank you for adding that. Coming back to the gap between grassroots levels and professional level, I wondered whether each of you could share a bit about what you think the government and sporting bodies could be doing to kind of address that.
Oh, okay.
I thought we had a routine.
No, I'll remain first, whatever, don't worry. So, in football, I would say the reason why you don't see a lot of girls from ethnic background playing in the national team is because all the trials and all these CPDs, like playing, so all the trainings, all the trials, they're just so far away from everyone. So I would say most ethnic parents would say, I'm not going to drive 4 hours, I'm not going to go sleep somewhere overnight. So it would be nice if all these governing bodies bring the trials and all the nearer to where everyone else is, so that everyone gets an equal opportunity. I would say go into schools and actually get girls that are not reached involved in the game and make them feel like they also belong in the game.
Yeah, I think I would echo what JJ said in terms of like accessibility. Like I grew up in a council estate, and there's no way you'd see a rugby ball in a council estate. And even in 2025, there's no way you'll see a rugby ball on the council estate. So I feel like having that accessibility in areas where they don't feel like rugby's for them. I remember going to an event recently, a Muslim women event. Many of them played football, and I was a panelist on that event, and a lot of people came up to me like, we never even thought of rugby as an option, but obviously you do it. So I want to, do you have any classes? We'd love to come and do rugby. And it dawned on me that something that I knew already, but representation, as you mentioned, is huge. Just because I was there and I was talking about rugby, something went off in their head like, okay, we can actually play rugby. Maybe this is a pathway for us. So I guess governing bodies like celebrating that, those that are already out there, because I'm not the only Muslim rugby player. I've got a whole group that I'm doing, and there are lots of us. Not lots of us, there are some of us, but I think going into those people's stories and sharing it worldwide or nationally, I think it's really important so that people can see it and actually feel like they can also become rugby players themselves. So representation, I think, is huge.
I just want to add to that as well. Investment's a big thing. Now we can sit here and say Sport England need to do this, NGBs need to do that. British Muslims give a lot of charity every single year. Zakat is part of our 5 pillars, right? And actually, if every Muslim donated £1 into local community causes, whether that was developing youth clubs via the mosques or community centres, and work within our communities to develop that and not rely on external funding such as Sport England and NGBs, because we can't rely on them, that would make a massive impact, because community cohesion is so important, and there's so many fantastic examples of community organisations and local mosques using sport and physical activity as a way for social cohesion, because we need to remember it's part of your sunnah as well. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, did lots of physical activity in sport, and we should really embrace that. So there's a lot we can ask for NGBs and Sport England, but I think the quicker way through it is going to be if we, as British Muslim communities, start investing, even if it's just a little bit, into our own little pots. That will probably get us further, and that will probably be a lot more sustainable as well.
Nalette, we spoke about this, and you talked about how there isn't enough funding to kind of get people to that Premiership level. Could you share a bit about that, please?
Yeah, so I think when it comes to player pathways now, there's not as much support specifically within female sport. Female and disability sport, we have to be able to get, as JJ touched on earlier, of the 4-hour journey just to be able to go to a scouting event. I think it is important to say that, firstly, there are national governing bodies that are making headway in this, and I don't want it to come across as we spend 45 minutes just telling everybody what they're doing wrong. There are a lot of things that are moving in the right direction, but I think we need to have more support when it comes to getting either more events, so they're more widespread, or getting funding to be able to get those young people to those pathways. We have, at the moment, it's happened in netball and football. I don't know if it's happened amongst any other sport, but there's a massive cohort of young girls from a Pakistani background that are now joining the Pakistan national team. So football, they've done it, and netball, and they've won trophies, so these girls are good. But they're not joining the England or the GB teams because of the lack of support or the fact that they were picked up too late. So for football, you enter between 11 and 13 is when you get scouted to move on to a pathway. If you've not got caught within that time and you've not had the enough training within that time, then you're not going to get picked up and play a pathway, no matter how well you end up being by the time you get to 14, 15. You've lost your chance, in which point a lot of these girls are going to applying for dual nationality so they can play for other teams because they're not getting it here. So there is a massive issue in this, and it's whether they're not getting enough coaching young enough to be able to get them into the pathways on time, whether they're not getting the right funds or support to be able to get themselves to scouting events. I think there needs to be a lot more research and a lot more things that are done to look into what is stopping these girls. It might be barriers to kit, like I said, for a lot of girls that play. If they want to play in hijab and they want to wear tracksuit bottoms, they're not going to be able to. You have to wear skins, even within the rule books that do allow hijab. It is skins, it's not tracksuit bottoms. So for those of you who don't know, skins is like leggings, essentially, like thin leggings. So that is what's within the rule book, not being able to wear tracksuit bottoms where your body isn't showing and they feel more comfortable. So there needs to be more time that's put into looking at where this comes, but getting them to tournaments. You've got a lot of people, especially within, like for Bradford, where the majority of Bradford is in IMD 1 to 3 areas. And if you look at those people, then add in those that have a disability, they've got to then pay themselves to get to tournaments. They've got to pay for their kit while they're there. So flight tickets, whatever it might be to get to a tournament, then their own kit, finding their own sponsors. We had the most famous one at the moment of Lucy Bronze paying 10,000 towards blind football so that the England team could get to their tournament. Why are we having to have players step in and do that? Why is that not something that NGBs or Sports England are already supporting? Why are those athletes having to find their own money to get to those tournaments and things like that? So I think money is a key factor, as we've talked about. I think we need to just spend more time to finding out why these players are not getting picked up, why they're then having to go and play for other countries. They've grown up in the UK, why are they not able to support and represent the UK teams? So I think that there needs to be some more research that's done into that.
Thank you. I'm conscious that we're running out of time. I'm just going to finish off by asking Zainab to tell us how she earned the nickname of Bulldozer.
Okay. So a bit of a segue, but this month is Prematurity Awareness Month as well. So I was born prematurely. I was born at 26 weeks. Very hard to believe. And obviously fought for my life in hospital, and alhamdulillah, doctors and nurses, and obviously by the word of Allah, I was able to make it out. This was 32 odd years ago, so neonatal medicine has definitely advanced since then, but I think that sort of spirit, that fighting spirit in me is probably led to me becoming the Bulldozer. And so before I tell you about the Bulldozer, I usually ask people, the crowd, when you hear Bulldozer, what comes to mind? Smashing, yeah. A wrecking ball. Aggressive, wrecking ball, yeah. Any more from the back? Powerful, yeah. Yeah. Oh, you've heard this one, haven't you?
Yeah.
She's heard. Sorry? Oh, I love that. I haven't heard that one before. So a bulldozer is a construction equipment you usually see on building sites, right? And what does it do? It smashes things, it demolishes things, just like me being a black Muslim woman in rugby, smashing stereotypes, breaking down barriers. But it's not just about breaking things, it's also about paving the way and building something bigger and better, like what it would do on a construction site. And I always say there's 3 ingredients to becoming a bulldozer. Number 1, you've got to be bold. Number 2, you've got to be brave. And number 3, which I think is the most important ingredient, if you don't have this, you definitely cannot be a bulldozer, and that is you've got to be yourself. You can be bold, brave in yourself, you're a bulldozer. And I look across this room, bulldozers everywhere. everyone has a bulldozer in them, you just got to bring it out. And yeah, that's my nickname, and I'll share it with everyone today.
Thank you. That's such a nice way to finish.
Beautiful.
Right, I think, are we going into another break? Yeah, quick coffee break before our next session.
Hello, everyone. Can I please ask you to take your seats? Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. This is our last session of the day. A quick reminder, can everyone please remember to switch off their mobile phones? We're taping the event. And a couple of social media call-outs as usual. Please follow Hyphen on Instagram, online Hyphen, and the same on X. With that said and done, I would like to introduce our final guest, Lord Wajid Khan, former Faith Communities and Resettlement Minister, in conversation. Please give him a round of applause. Lord Khan, thank you very much for coming to Hyphen Festival 2025.
It's a pleasure, Burhan.
I wanted to kind of start this fireside chat by basically kind of going back to roots. You know, this is an audience made up of predominantly second and third generation British Muslims. We all have a lot in common. And I kind of wanted to start off by asking you about growing up as a Muslim in Burnley back in the 1980s. Your father was a taxi driver. It was quite an extraordinary journey to the centre of power. Can you expand on that, please?
Yeah, first of all, Assalamu alaikum, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you, Burhan, and congratulations to Hyphen on its festival launch. I think is a really important initiative that you've taken. So my journey, I call it a long ride. So I was born in 79, 5 siblings, father taxi driver, mum just a brilliant woman, housewife, boss of the house, and grew up in the 80s in a Burnley. Have you all been to Burnley? Anyone heard of Burnley? Yeah. We're a Premier League football team, by the way, just to let you know. So yeah, it was interesting. I actually grew up not in the wide, strong Muslim community. Most of my friends were from white community, and so I was like I think that was really important for me growing up, having that kind of diverse kind of childhood friendships with people who look different than me, who are like from a different culture from me. I think that's a really important point I want to outline. And so it's very difficult. Just to move fast forward, studied law at university, went to university, did an LLB law, came to London to do the barrister course called BPC at the time. No, BBC was bar vocational course. Now it's BPTC. I'll be quite frank with you. I didn't like London. I was scared of London. So, I just went back. I left the bar course, did my master's in European law, did some projects which a couple of them won the national awards on community cohesion, especially around Northern Ireland in Corrymeela. Was offered lectureship at the university where I studied. So after my master's did that, and then I wrote a program, academic program on community leadership and volunteering and community action. And I spent many, many years, and I stood for elections. I stood for elections, and this is an important point, because BNP in my town, there were 7 councillors. So my kind of involvement in politics was, to be quite blunt with you, because there were 6 or 7 BNP councillors. And I felt, some of you will understand this, some of our elders were just more focused on doing passport attestations and references, but not challenging BNP or not advocating against the hatred and the divisions that the BNP were trying to cause in my town, and that really hurt me. So I got into politics. So gladly we got rid of every BNP councillor in the borough. I stood for the European election in 2014 to get rid of Nick Griffin. He went. I joined the European Parliament. I was there for a few years there. Brexit happened. I came home. I was appointed in the House of Lords. Boris Johnson, Prime Minister, our leader, Keir Starmer. And then I've been a minister in 2024. I had 4 ministries: Minister for Faith, Communities, Resettlement, and Housing. But just an important point, I also had the great privilege of working as a taxi driver. And I say this because it taught me so much about public and dealings with, talking to people. A bit tricky sometimes on a Friday night when a couple of people had a few drinks. Big lesson in public service. And that was because at the time we didn't have any grants or loans to fund my master's postgraduate, so I had to pay for my master's myself. But it gave me a really good insight. I think my father was quite worried because I got too comfortable. I actually enjoyed taxi driving. And he thought, well, I've just done this all my life. Do I want you to do all this? And I said, no, I just need to do it to fund my studies. So it's a long ride as well. So I've also been working as a taxi driver, and I love the job, by the way. I used to get the most tips on Friday night. I'll stop there.
And you raise a couple of really interesting points there, kind of historically. You were in your 20s when the riots happened in Bradford and Burnley and Oldham and elsewhere. And you've just talked about the British National Party, who were a kind of key part of those riots, right? You know, can you kind of cast your mind back to 2001 and just let people know a little bit more here about how that affected you? What was it like being a Burnley Muslim, growing up, you know, witnessing these riots?
Yeah.
How did it affect you?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. Just to be clear, I was actually not part of the riots, in case you kind of anyone's thinking. So I observed the riots. It was a very scary feeling, because what the riots did was, there was a number of issues in Burnley. One was inequality, and what's scary, I'm seeing this played out over again now, cost of living, people not getting a good deal in life, people can't get the housing ladder, people just making ends meet, looking towards the end of the month. Everyone, from all communities, by the way. But I felt like when things were, for them from the mainstream, there was like, this is not happening, and there was too much othering going on, right? Which is happening now. Blaming other people for a situation, a reality in the United Kingdom, which is a cost of living, which is the government needs to do much more to fix, and it is trying, but obviously there needs to be much more focus to ensure people can have a better, more money in their pockets. So that I saw the whole misconception, rumours, total. So for me, it was the first kind of taste of fake news. That community is getting everything, we're getting nothing. These people are like that. This is what they do, and I blame that on. And this is really interesting, because at the time there was no social media there. Like, rewind this was without the whole Twitter, sort of Facebook. So there was there's a lot of ignorance. There was a lot of people out there sowing division. So there was political operators already operating, and in a vacuum, and they were filling the gaps themselves. And I felt so hurt, because this is the reality. I remember we had a shop at the time as well, and I remember people would look at you differently. You know there's something not right, and a lot of people in this room can relate. When you kind of, it's in the air, you feel it. People don't have to say things to you to let you know how they feel about you as a person. They just need to sometimes look at you, and you know exactly that mad person probably thinking this. And for me, 2001 was a tense time. People that used to, neighbours, friends, colleagues, that we used to regularly have conversations, chit-chat, go out with people, and never thought anything about it. Actually, that whole experience in 2001 made me feel, actually, people are thinking that I'm a problem here, that my community, people that look like me, are of a particular kind of people. And there was so much ignorance and hatred spread. But the positive side to that is that it's taking a long time, and this is a really important point I'm going to make to you. There are no short-term fixes to them challenges. It takes time, and I think there's a big role for schools to play in education. How we kind of, not just, I'm sick of this idea that you can have PE teachers teach RE or citizenship education. We need specialist people who can look at work with our young people in schools in particular, and share with them what it's like to be in modern 2025 Britain, and have this kind of exposure to different people. And that's why it's important what I said at the start. I was kind of grateful to have the exposure, to have, not just people that look like me, that look different than myself, but there's too many people living in the kind of comfort zones. And we've got to, if people can live the way they want to live, but we should use our opportunity in schools and education. And there's a curriculum review going on at the moment by Professor Becky Francis to look at how we can connect more people, how we can spend time learning about each other. Because the first time I came across somebody who was an Indian Muslim was at university. Kid you not? And the first time I came across somebody from a Jewish background was when I met my lawyer, who was in Manchester. So, this is a challenge. We don't actually have the opportunity or the kind of the encouragement at an early age to spend time with people across the wide depth and breadth of our country.
So that's a really good point, which I want to kind of move on a little bit. You're talking about 2001.
Yeah.
If we fast forward to last year, very similar situation.
Yeah.
Riots around the UK, I think 20 towns and cities in flames, Muslim immigrant communities targeted, you know, a lot of similarities. You were working last year as Faith Minister.
Yeah, I was. Yeah, community
A
minister.
large part of your job was visiting these affected communities before and after the riots. Can you explain to the audience here what kind of similarities you saw? Because some things haven't changed that much,
Yeah.
right?
Yes, so it was the same othering, same misconceptions, same stereotypes, same ignorance, and except it was on steroids because of social media, right? That was a different catalyst. So what taken days or weeks to get this kind of negative processing of each other, othering and the hatred spread, it took hours this time. And that's because there was people out there, there was a lot of commentating. I was the first minister to visit Southport after the Prime Minister and Home Secretary. I was there. It was a very difficult, really difficult experience for me. And I met police officers who were there at the scene of the initial horrific attack where we lost 3 beautiful angels and many people were injured. The same police officers went back on duty at night only to have bricks and stones thrown at them. And so I first of all, salute their bravery and courage in doing their frontline jobs and all the frontline emergency services and thoughts about the victims. So going there was a real eye opener for me. And then you're right, Burhan. I actually went to, in my time as a minister, in 14 months, I undertook 220 faith visits, not community visits, just faith visits. I had the responsibility for community cohesion. So very early on, we gave a recovery package. We gave £15 million to 20 places who were based on index, not just randomly given. There was a deprivation index and a lot of data analysis. And then further, I worked on a program called Plan for Neighbourhoods, Plan for Communities, where we give £20 million, £2 million a year for 10 years in different parts of the country, which has just been announced recently. And then we give £1.5 million to places called Pride in community, Pride in Place communities. So I worked on that initiative because I always believe you can't do community cohesion on the cheap. You just can't do it. And that was my strongest message to government. Every time I met government, number 10, I meant number 10 Downing Street colleagues. Anytime I met, I said, I'm not going to do community cohesion on the cheap. I said to the Treasury, Darren Jones, I can't do community cohesion on the cheap. I said to Rachel Reeves, everybody got the opportunity. And I'm glad we've put some money into communities. And that money is about making sure we take a long-term approach to fixing some of the pride problem in our communities. People thinking, like I went to a place called Middlesbrough. I met a young woman in a hijab, and she said to me, Lord Khan, we are sick to death of being consulted upon consulted upon consulted. Nothing ever changes in our communities. And they said, look at the communities, just looks the same. And that's why it's so important. One of my ministries was regional investment, to put money into communities, invest into communities. And more importantly, we need to find a way where we can have a wonderful avenue where people can come together and sit together. And together, Angela Rayner, who's working for the Deputy Prime Minister, she made a big thing of making sure we transfer power into the local communities because they know their communities well. We can't sit in Whitehall and pretend that we know what's best in Burnley or Oldham or Middlesbrough or any of the part, Hartlepool. We've got to make sure we speak to people, experts in that community. So just to finish off your point, your question, it was a very humbling experience to go to Southport and many, many towns and cities across the country. I never stopped doing that because there's no point sitting in the office. The only way we can get an idea and grasp understanding of the situation is actually spending time in them communities and listening to people, not just from local government, from the faith communities, from the civil society, from the voluntary organisations and community organisations. And I had the privilege to hear many, many stories. And one of my most toughest moments was when I was in a mosque in Newcastle, and two young Muslim women in hijab were saying to me, we've not been on the public transport since the disturbances. People were in real fear. And I think, that is not where we should be having our country. If one person is attacked, it's an attack on all of us.
We at Hyphen, we have interviewed women who are, Muslim women who are too scared to go shopping, to do their weekly shop, as an effect of the riots last year. That brings up another kind of interesting point about some of the challenges that the government faces here. Less than 2 months ago, Elon Musk, the owner of X, addressed the Unite the Kingdom far-right rally on a video link. And he called for two things. He called for a dissolution of Parliament and a change of government in the UK. Do you think this government can do more to tackle disinformation, misinformation, the weaponization of social media? And do you think this government should boycott some of these channels?
First of all, let me condemn them comments by Elon Musk. I think we've got to call out them comments, awful comments. And we have a great history, great tradition in our country for freedom of expression, freedom to protest, and of course, that long may that tradition continue, and we'll defend that as long as we can. It's a fundamental part of our democracy. On your point, there's an online safety bill, which is already a legislation passed. At the time, I was in the senior level government meetings, and Peter Kyle, who was the tech secretary at the time, now business secretary, was very strong in making sure we speak to all the major social media platforms to ensure that hatred isn't allowed to spread, and there needs to be much more done to tackle hatred. And I think that's a work in progress. Them conversations have to continue. X is an important tool. People across government use it. The government doesn't use just X. There's a wide variety of social media. Blue Sky's coming in as well. You've got Instagram. People are using different ways to communicate their message. And we're only seeing what's happening in New York in the power of social media and knowing how to use it correctly and use algorithms carefully. But look, it is worrying, misinformation and disinformation, and it's a job for DSIT, who continue to monitor this very closely and working with partners such as the Met Police and other police forces across the country. We should call out whenever we see it. And I thought the Prime Minister was very strong after Southport. Whether you commit crime in person or online, you will face the full force of the law. And if you look at the convictions and the prosecutions and convictions, the police force and the courts working at a fast pace, I was at that particular moment, I was very proud to see that the people that was spreading here causing problems and actually physical damage to our, in the buildings in our communities were faced the harshest part of our law.
Since then, these far-right marches have become the norm around the country. There's not a weekend that goes by without a march taking place somewhere. What would you like to see the Prime Minister do to lower the temperature?
As I said previously, the freedom to protest is a fundamental part of our democracy. Let me say something very interesting to you. And this is a really interesting, deep analysis. People that marched post-Southport protests, not everybody was far right, okay? I saw women with children, children there on the marches. I think the point I need to make clear to everybody is that too many prime ministers have stood on the steps of Downing Street and said we should look after those that have left behind or just about managing. And that's why I heard in that young woman from Middlesbrough when she said to me, we've been sick to death of being consulted. There's a chunk of our communities, our wide mainstream across the whole communities that feel the system doesn't work for them. The systems failed for them. This failed them. There's no aspiration problem. There's been a multi-generation issue of worklessness. I think them people on the march, we should talk to them people. We should find a way of how do we address their concerns. And I know there's elements of the marches that are of course, have their own purposes, but there are the people who come on marches for all different reasons, and marches are quite big. So you have a wide variety of views. We see this as we see in some of the marches here in London. There's arrests that are being made. people get hurt, police officers get attacked. So we should call out all them elements without fear or favour, be firm on that, but also find a way to ensure that people can express their views and can express their concerns, and that's absolutely their right.
How would you kind of reassure people here and in the audience and people watching on our live stream, Muslims especially, but these marches have also affected non-Muslims, as you brought up too. How would you kind of reassure themselves about their safety, their future here in the UK?
So first of all, we want to make sure that everyone is not just safe, but made to feel safe. One of the initiatives I worked on with the Home Secretary was to ensure that, that marches don't go near places of worship. That affects all people of faith, not just Jewish or Muslim communities. That affects all people of faith, because that has been a concern where people have been intimidating and harassing people near places of worship, and as we saw, attacking places of worship. I mean, religious hatred is a problem, folks. But let me assure you, I personally, with the support of the Deputy Prime Minister, commissioned a definition on Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred, whichever the government adopts, or recommended by the working group. So it's important that the message is that we have to make sure all of us are safe, because until all of us are safe, none of us are safe. So I reassure colleagues that there is a lot of processing going on, focus, financial support to security of mosques and in other religious places of worship. There's also money, governments supporting organisations to monitor and tackle religious hate crime. And there's quite a few organisations now that are monitoring Islamophobia or anti-Muslim hatred, whichever term you want to use. So we are constantly going to make sure that we can focus our energy on protecting people, and because everyone is important in our country. That's one of the fundamental rights. Safer streets, tough on crime, and making sure that those that perpetrate this kind of behaviour face the full force of the law. What I also have to encourage colleagues in the room is to report. And too many people would think, it's too much waste of time. There's a lot of time interviews, but I'm telling you, the more people report, because it's important, because you're going to help other people not to have that same consequence or same experience as what you did. And it's sad that's happening. For some colleagues, I'll say this, I'm seeing a lot of the 70s and 80s and the incidents taking place again in 2025. It's beyond belief. Some of the language by mainstream politicians is so unfortunate, condemnable, and pretty disgraceful, to be quite frank with you.
On that definition of Islamophobia, what do you predict will happen with that? This is something that's mentioned in the press on a near daily basis. You obviously have something to say about it, some thoughts. Can you kind of look into your crystal ball?
Burhan, just to be clear, I'm no longer government. And this is important to share with you. I mean, again, you're talking about being a minister of Muslim background. I was fascinated with my experience of 14, 15 months. To be honest, it was a 7-day job. I didn't rest. I was out and about talking to people, doing the job properly. I know there was something about me being from a Muslim background, Bayan background, I've got to try ultra hard to make sure, over and above, to make sure this job is, my heart and soul, my blood, sweat and tears. And since I left, I've been trying to save my marriage, by the way, because I never saw my kids and wife for 15 months, which I'm doing quite well, by the way, which is good news. But it's given me a breather. But I've done a lot of, I launched something called Common Ground Resilience Fund. So people can apply, organisations can apply, small organisations, voluntary organisations in your local communities that you want to make a difference. Common Ground was my big ticket. I want to see people coming together. Again, I've talked about the work I did about plan for neighbourhoods and communities. Money's gone in as part of that process. So I've done whatever I can. But on the religious hate crime, it's quite hurtful to see that the amount of anti-Muslim hatred and Islamophobia is in this country. So my focus was, if you're going to tackle the problem, you need to define the problem. There's too many definitions like out there. Everyone has so many definitions. So I wanted to bring it down to one definition where people and institutions and organizations could kind of relate to, rather than that or this one, that one. I wanted a government definition. And one of the important points is, 3 points, that this definition will have, this is in our terms of reference, it'll have no limit to freedom of speech. There'll be no blasphemy law coming in. And it's just about protecting Muslims, not Islam. Religions don't need protection. They've been around for thousands of years. People should be able to criticize religion. If you don't agree with religion, fine. However, the narrative and the commentary has just totally ignored them 3 important points, which was actually put out in our terms of reference when we launched this commission. And so I'm hopeful the government realizes the lived experiences of British Muslims at this moment of time and adopts a definition. And I'm doing my part to use my influence and networks to ensure that we do the right thing to protect people, and we send the right message that we've got to make sure people are safe and made to feel safe. And I hope that that message is sent back to British Muslims who suffer religious hate crime, strong and loud and clear.
Thank you. I think this marks a great opportunity to take some questions from the audience. I'd like to try and ask Mohammed Abdullah, I think sitting somewhere here, wanted to ask a question earlier on. Hi, there.
So earlier, my name is Kareem. I represent an organisation called AACMA. Earlier on, we had the first God, it's gone out my head. The first group, whoever, the first panel group, and one of the questions that was asked but was not answered was getting younger people more involved in politics. And they showed that there was a deficiency in young Muslims being involved in politics. So what would be your recommendation? Because, and I'm not a young person, okay? So for me, I feel that the Muslim community have been betrayed by politicians. Like one of the points they made this morning was about what was happening in Gaza and the language that was used to define it to us. And it was like, it wasn't what we were seeing in front of us. So like bearing that in mind, how do you feel we can get more younger Muslims involved in politics?
Mr. Kareem, that's a wonderful question. We're taking just to answer that question.
Yes, please.
That's a wonderful question. I actually agree with you. We've got to get more young people involved in politics, and we've got to get young people more across the board. I'm not saying they should have a particular choice of party. Young people, British Muslims in particular, there's no homogenous group. It's such a heterogeneous group of people. There's just less than 4 million people. And I think we've got to, political parties have got to do their job and try and engage people to come forward. But also, we've got to recognise, from a societal point of view, there is still a deficit of more young people from minority groups to come forward in particular. So the natural way of focus is making sure we have more civil society focus on understanding that the power of politics exists, how you could make a difference in your communities from a voluntary or civil point of view, but also from a local government or a regional government or national government point of view. Look, I've just announced initiatives that's going to hundreds of places across the country. I signed that off. That is a policy. I've just signed off, commissioned a definition on anti-Muslim hatred. I've just revived the anti-Semitism working group because I'm really big on religious hate crime. That's what my big work. I've just reset the relationship between government and faith communities as part of the team. Right? Government has just reinstated Interfaith Week to show how important faith is to our community. I mean, like this idea, I'm just sorry it's a bit long-winded, but we wanted to ensure the relationship between government and faith is changed because too many times we've been transactional with faith communities. We only come to faith communities when we need them. And that's wrong, like an emergency service in crisis. And look at COVID. If it wasn't for mosques, churches, gurdwaras, temples, and synagogues, how would people get tested? How would people get vaccinated? So we want to make sure that we recognise that the faith has an important role. Young people across the board, you're seeing one of the areas I was working on, the elections bill, which is going to bring 16-year-olds into the fray for the first time ever, in England in particular, to vote at 16. The magic, there's no silver bullet to this, but what we've got to do is use our colleges and schools to ensure we look at the curriculum and fundamentally change the kind of perspective, how to make sure politics is relevant and understood at a young age. Because I tell you something now, people in Burnley might ask random young people, they say, who collects your bins? They have no idea, right? There's local politics. People don't realise how things work, and we've got to address that issue. And so what we've got to really get to is use education, youth clubs, other support networks, but in particular school and colleges, to have a really clear focus on the power of politics, how you as a young person can get involved in politics, how you as a young person can move up the ladder. I didn't have no mentor in life. I just struggled my way through it. But what I spend my time now doing is spend my time speaking to young people in schools, because I need to ensure that to that 9, 10-year-old, I can see more people look like me, or have more opportunities to get involved in mainstream politics and play a role in making a contribution to their country.
Any more questions? Hi.
Thank you. I know it's lunch soon, so I don't want to be the barrier between food and conversation.
Sorry, what's your name?
My name's Sabra Amidi. I'm an imam and content creator online.
Hi.
First of all, thank you for your words, and also you mentioned you can't do community cohesion on the cheap. That's really important. And also, you mentioned about empowering communities on the ground to make things better, and I think that's really important. I've got 2 questions, if you allow. My first question is, how do we, on a grassroots level, encourage community cohesion? And number 2, it's frustrating, but what is the delay in defining anti-Muslim hate? Because my problem is, as a faith leader, I've engaged with the Jewish community many a times, and really good relationships with them. I went to Manchester and spoke to Channel 4 about the attack on the synagogue, because I'm from Manchester.
Yeah.
We are very easy to jump to any issues against the Jewish community, and rightly so. We should stand united to call it anti-Semitism. But my upset and worry and frustration is the time it's taken to define anti-Muslim hate. Thank you.
I mean, 2 brilliant questions. First of all, what we've got to do much more on the grassroots level is actually, we've got to actually, like I said to you, it shouldn't have to take, to get to university to get to know people who from similar faith, from different dynamics. I mean, this is, for me, we've got to make sure we have the opportunity to. So the point I'm going to make to you, Imam Sahib, is we have to ensure that we interact with people that look different than us, okay? So there's 3, we're going to go into academic mode here. There's 3 types of social capital. One is bonding, second is bridging, and the third is linking. Bonding is getting networks and relationships with people that are similar to us. So if I'm a Liverpool supporter, so sorry about this, guys. So if all I spend my time is speaking to Liverpool supporters, I wouldn't really know exactly how my life is, about what it's like to be an Arsenal supporter. God help them, right? But bridging is me spending time with people who are from different values, different race, different background, different religion, different creed. And linking is another important part of social capital, is how do you connect people, communities who can have power, access to people with power, so they can have access to making sure their community gets better. So for me, if you don't interact with different people, you don't get to know them. And if you don't get to know them, you'll never understand them. And that is a fundamental problem. So how do we do this? We need to ensure that we connect with like-minded people from different organizations, different religions, and have that connection. I did this on a grand scale. So one of the initiatives I did this was, I don't know if you heard about something called the Drumlanric Accords, where we had Jewish denominational faith leaders with Muslim denominational faith leaders. We took them all the way to Scotland at Drumlanric Castle, kindly hosted by the Duke of Buccleuch. And you can Google this, Drumlanric Accords, to get Muslims and Jewish faith leaders together to discuss how in the United Kingdom we can spread more commonalities, more kind of working together relationships, how we can ensure that whatever happens in different parts of the world doesn't feed through in our communities through hatred and intolerance of each other. And that was an initiative which was really successful. We actually got invited by His Royal Highness King Charles at Buckingham Palace. My concern was, and this answers your question, there's no point doing it at the top hierarchical, where grassroots, there's so much difficult conversations that need to be had. So we've got to have them difficult conversations, and we've got to reach out to ensure that we can get young people accessible and in front of people in other communities and the backgrounds in particular, and we can spread that kind of commonality, because there's so much that's common to each one of us rather than that, that's different from each other. I mean, look at Muslims and Jews. Out of all the faiths, that is the most correlating faiths in terms of theological perspective. On your question of anti-Muslim hatred, I'm going to be quite clear with you. I'm frustrated as you, right? And if I be quite candid here, my biggest frustration as being the minister in government was there's the process of getting some really good initiatives and policies through and getting them in reality to make sure then they have a real profound effect on communities. So that whole, if you look at the biggest criticism of people tell me of government, is there's so much good legislation that's been going on, really good initiatives, but however, people are not feeling it yet. So that is mechanics and machinery of number 10 operation to ensure we can get things done faster. So the frustration's there. I started, if I'll be quite honest with you, I thought about the chair, Dominic Grieve. I wanted Dominic Grieve. I was quite kind of hard-nosed about this. I want Dominic. Dominic's got skin in the game. He's got legal experience. And I'll be quite frank with you, I know Dominic knew how to handle the tough press because he has faced it all during Brexit. So I'm quite hopeful. My understanding is it's going to be very soon. I'm pushing hard. But you're right, it shouldn't have taken this long. That's one of the first pieces of work I did when I got into government to tackle this scourge of religious hate crime towards Muslims, and as well as my other wider work across all faiths. This is not happening at the expense of other religions. Everyone, there's support out there for all religions. And I think it's important to say this. Positively, when I left government, I was very humbled and kind, very, very appreciative of all the letters I got. The most letters came from the Jewish community. I was saying this before, and because I had a really profound relationship with the communities, all communities. I mean, I did 220 faith visits. I met Zoroastrians, Jains, Baha'is, Quakers, Buddhists, all the not just the main, religions, everybody. So I think that's going to happen quite fast. And I'm not going to sugarcoat this. It's taken far too long. And that's one of the lessons that we've got to learn as government, and my government, who I work for, to ensure that process is much faster. Because if it takes this long for an important policy like this, then people would feel frustrated, and they're likely to feel frustrated. But I'm just going to say to you, watch this space.
Can we take one more question? Hi.
Thank you very much. My name is Fiza Qureshi. I'm the CEO of the Migrants' Rights Network.
I didn't catch your name, sorry.
Fiza Qureshi from the Migrants' Rights Network, sorry. This is a topic that has probably been skirted around a little bit, around immigration specifically, because obviously it is the hottest topic at the moment. It's the most controversial. It is being manufactured as a massive issue, particularly Muslims being that threat to the UK, and the whole kind of great replacement theory as this is extremely prevalent in the far right, but you're seeing it parroted by some in government and some of the politicians, where it manifests in we need better integration, or there are legitimate concerns around migration. So it means that we're seeing that Muslims, particularly migrants, are kind of like doubling down on proving their worth and deservingness of being in the UK. And I want, and how they have integrated, right? So this always have to prove that I speak English, I pay taxes, etc. And I was wondering how we can move away from this argument of having to prove our worth in the UK constantly, in terms of these integration narratives, and how you might try and push that forward.
Fiza, there's a lot stacked in that question, a lot of themes. So I was a minister responsible for resettlement. So my job was to resettle people from Afghanistan, Ukraine, Hong Kong, and other areas in particular. So I was a fundamental part of that MEDVAC scheme, Palestinian children coming to the UK for medical treatment. I was pretty much part of that whole process. My view is on this is clear. I mean, I'm talking for myself. I think the government has to absolutely rightly tackle illegal migration. That's something that is wrong, it's illegal, so people shouldn't be here. That's the reality. I'm really concerned about the language that's coming out. I mean, the island of strangers speech was wrong. That shouldn't have happened. I get the point what the Prime Minister was trying to make, but the choice of words were just not the right choice of words, especially if it's been used in the past by people trying to sow division. So we've got to be honest and look at this from a perspective that there's a big housing crisis. There are people living in hotels. That's not fair on people living in hotels. And it's concerning for people who have hotels used in different ways, in the past, and they're seeing this happening. So how we do resettlement is important. So one of the things I did was make resettlement as part of cohesion, because to ensure that people came over, had the best opportunity in life. They're people suffering, and the people that helped the United Kingdom when we were at war. And it's only right to oblige to people that supported us when we needed them, helped us, whether that's interpreters, whether that's just analysts in Afghanistan. So my focus is that we've got to celebrate each other's, rather than, you're right, the point you're making, let's not be defensive. Look at the NHS, right? If it wasn't for migration, the NHS wouldn't be where it is now, one of the greatest institutions in the country, even though it has challenges and there's funding issues. We've got to celebrate the contribution of migrants. Everyone in this room, the parents, grandparents, have played a role to rebuild this country. Look at the millions of Muslims that fought in the war. And that's why I'm going to tell you now, one of the pieces of work I did was to launch a Muslim war memorial, because people often forget when it came to war, our country in war, World War I and II, Muslims volunteered, didn't get paid, volunteered from the subcontinent to protect the United Kingdom. There's too much, again, discourse where people will, there's no difference now at the moment the way commentators and some of the far-right attacks on Muslims in particular and people of colour, they look at people like they think I'm an asylum seeker. There's no differentiation of people that have been born here and lived here for God knows how many years. They've all been grouped into one category, which is very dangerous. So we've got to fight back, champion each one's a contribution to this country. This is the greatest multi-ethnic country in the world. I stand by that. Long may that continue. People try to sow division, will keep sowing division, and it happens in cycles again. But we've got to be strong, unashamedly proud British, citizens of this country. We might have different faiths, all of us. We might have different colours, we might have different ethnicities, but that is what United Kingdom is best. So I say this with the caveat, there has to be more support for refugees and asylum seekers to learn English through English language and contribute to the country. You've got to give people, if you're going to support people, you need to give them mechanisms and resources to contribute to the country. I met so many amazing success stories. I visited Afghan families, Hong Kongers. I visited Ukrainian schools, and I found out people are making already a difference to this community. The life in the UK test is not fit for purpose, right? Like I can give you that test now. I'm telling you now, only a few of you have passed that test. I don't know the answers. Who was the king in 1918 or 1856, whatever? Who was the prime minister then? Like, we've got to work out how do we make sure we can make practical life in 2025 for Afghan women or young women who are coming to this country, rightly so, through refugee status. How do we make sure they can best contribute to this country? I think the rhetoric out there is difficult, dangerous, but we can't, my last point is we can't out-reform. We should stick to our values, what we stand for. You never win a war on other people's territory. Be what we stand for, our values as a party, and keep focusing what we stand for, and that's how we win this.
Lord Khan, thank you very much for your time. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
That marks the end of Hyphen Festival 2025. Please come next door and join us for lunch. We'd love to do some networking. Thank you.
That was great.